Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike McQueen, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the podcast For the Love of Libraries. Our theme is empowering librarians with confidence in the age of AI, and I'm excited to welcome Sam Helmick. Sam, welcome.
Hi, great to be with you, Mike.
Most people that are librarians already know who Sam is, but Sam, could you kind of introduce yourself and give us a little background professionally and also with your connections with AI?
Oh, definitely. So I am the ALA president for 2025, 2026. And so I get to represent 46,000 members of the American Library Association, which is the oldest and largest library association on the planet. We're about to be 150 years old, so it's an exciting year for many reasons.
Oh,
My
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's exciting. My 9 to 5 gig is I'm the Community and Access Services Coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library, so I'm responsible to advocate, resource, and support three excellent teams of staff: bookmobile and outreach, public relations and marketing, and then circulation. And
Okay.
my connection with AI would be writing policies that connect to all of those pieces in my own library, learning and engaging in our interest groups throughout ALA, CORE, PLA about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and then engaging in just thought-provoking conversations like the one I'm certain we're going to have today.
Oh man, that's great. Okay, so chapter one of my book is titled "Superheroes Needed," and the theme is kind of preparing for the time at which AI gets to a stage that's called artificial general intelligence. Now, before we dive into that, the first question that relates to that, let's start off with a fun memory for the love of libraries. Can you share something fun or inspiring about libraries or a librarian you know or a library that had an impact in your life?
Yes, at my first library, I remember we had a factory layoff, a Maytag, and there were a lot of wonderful guys and gals who had worked straight out of high school for 25, 30 years coming in and they'd never used an email address. They'd never had to apply for jobs online or unemployment through Iowa Works. And so one of my first weeks as a library was my reference colleague training me how to support creating resumes, signing up for library accounts, but then also email accounts. And then I worked with my programming staff, and they're like, and now we're going to do like this clothing swap, and people are going to exchange ties and suits and support each other, and the community is going to come together for that. And what was beautiful is that it blended. I had a guy who farmed for his family on the side, worked for Maytag for 40 hours, never had used an email address before. We became really good friends over the course of this vulnerable learning process. And then he actually got a tie for his interview for his next job at this clothing swap in our lobby. And I remember that he came running into the library to let me know when he got the job. And so what I loved about that is that we were there when he needed us to develop skills that he never might have needed otherwise up to retirement because of how the world is evolving. But then we also got him because every week now he'll come in and he'll get a new book for leisure reading
Hmm.
or a DVD to watch. And so I just really love that we have a lifelong user. And it would have been
Hmm.
satisfying even if we'd just been there when we needed him. So, to be
Hmm.
honest, that's probably one of my top five favorite personal library stories ever because I'm like, you,
Oh,
you don't have a better first week than that. That's pretty great.
oh man, that was your first week.
hmm
Oh, that's great. Well, and actually, you bring up a good point that, is a segue to my first question is about the how libraries have evolved and how we as librarians have in our roles, we've changed so much. We used to it used to be a model of like everyone would just come to the library to be able to get their information and sources and then when the internet came, it just kind of changed so much. We had to learn to evolve in our roles to be able to embrace that. And here we are again with AI facing a similar crossroads about needing to adapt and evolve. So, man, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so let's talk about artificial general intelligence. Let me read the definition that I have, at least at this point in my book. I'm days away from submitting my final manuscript to Bloomsbury. So
Awesome.
I have written, let's see. So AGI is an intelligent agent that can successfully perform any intellectual task that a human can. AGI marks a transformative milestone at which AI achieves human-level cognitive abilities across a wide range of tasks and domains. So basically different areas, potentially leading to rapid and unpredictable advancements in society. So the key to that is AGI. I mean, we hear about it all the time. There's so many people arguing about what specifically the definition is, and even more so debate about when we'll reach that point. But the key to remember what AGI is it's that AI systems are can perform in multiple domains. So they're not just really good at driving cars or typing words like a chatbot. They can do all the different domains on every kind of content available. So it's cross domain. That's the idea. So it's it's causing quite a bit of concern about what is going to happen once we get there, and you know, there's a lot of people that are anxious and nervous and stressed out about it too, because yes, there's promise for great, awesome reward, but there's also lots of dangers and concerns about what negative things might be able to happen. So, what are your thoughts about all that? I mean, it's a heavy question, but
Yeah, and I want your listeners to know that this is a Monday morning and I haven't had coffee yet. So this is a great question, and
that's
we're
right.
gonna go through it together. And if it's okay, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna start with a preamble of some like philosophical beliefs for me, and
Yes,
I think it's
please. Yeah.
often shared with other practitioners in our field. The first is like you can be like an Orwellian where you think that information is going to be redacted, and so it will be difficult to get access to content, knowledge, data that is relevant to our lives. You can also be an Ayn Randian where you think there's a tsunami of knowledge, and so we devalue it as if we're like printing more currency.
Mm,
And I would argue with you that right now in society we're kind of dealing with both.
mm,
And so philosophically, I always think of Earl of Birkenhead. I think he was like a parliamentarian, or he was in the like the House of Commons in the 1930s, and he would always, when somebody stood up and had this long answer, he'd say, I'm more informed, but none the wiser." And I always
mm,
liked that pithy response because right now you and I are working through with our students, with our patrons, with the public in general. What is the difference between content? What is the difference between content and information? What is the difference between information and wisdom or knowledge? And so I think often we are more informed, or the algorithms that we are developing are more informed, but they're not necessarily the wiser. And so when
mhm.
you talk about needing superheroes, I think that this conversation is relevant to those other matters because
Yeah.
depending on who develops the AGI, will we be getting content? Because like right now, you can get some assisted tech on your search engine of choice, and it's often a completely erroneous answer, but it's content. And so, is that information or is that noise? And who are the checks and balances of that to relate that across, like you said, spectrums and platforms, in order to have a cohesive knowledge in order to apply this. So I think we're very close to this, but I think we also have to recognize that those factors play in. So obviously, there's cause for concern, but I think it's more intersectional to the other causes that were really forefront of our minds right now.
Mm, mm.
Does that
Well,
make sense?
yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And there's also a lot of political influence that's involved with AGI. I mean, just in particular, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, they just recently, in the White House, announced Project Stargate, where, a $500 billion project over the next, I don't know, is it 10 years or whatever, to develop data centers. And there's just, there's such a global concern, geopolitical issues involved with which country is going to lead in AI, and the threat of China, t overtaking the US, as a world's dominant force or whatever. So, what you would probably have a great perspective about politics involved with librarianship in general. So, what are your thoughts about that?
So it makes me think of your superheroes because right now we are being called to defend the intellectual justice of our patrons and our public. And that can range from helping you with critical thinking and content assessment skills to, there are European nations right now that are allowing their constituencies, their citizens to copyright their image against AI so that deepfakes can't be used without some sort of legal recourse. And so I think being at the forefront of these conversations is essential. And I think that this is a lesson that we can learn from ebooks, not to get into your second question too
Yeah.
early, but
No.
I do realize that there are a lot of lessons from like past innovations that we have an opportunity to learn from here.
Mm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm kind of stuck now thinking about what my second question was, but
Oh, sorry.
no, no, it's so good. Oh yeah, yeah. So before we get into that though, if AGI, and one of my most well-respected AI experts is Demis Hassabis. He's the founder of DeepMind, which was acquired by Google. So he predicts a conservative of 5 years, which would bring us to around 2030. That he thinks that that's about between 5 and 10 years is what he said, multiple times. And so if that happens, and some other well-known and well-respected AI experts have said as early as 2 years or even 3 years, which would be 2027 or 2028, and if this happens and these systems are that complex, I try really hard to be balanced and not to be extreme, use extreme language and there's so much of that fear mongering in AI and everything. So it's a weird, tricky balance to know, when information you get about this is legitimate and when is it just, like exaggerated or whatever. So, but if it is true and we do reach that in the next handful of years, I can't help but think about how much our patrons are going to need help and support and leadership with AI. So I mean, you're the epitome of a great leader of librarians. I mean, there isn't another position right now in the world probably that's at the level that you're at with it. So what are your thoughts about that with AI leadership?
I think as a leader, some of the work that you do is encouraging and uplifting other leaders because this is what library workers are. Whether you recognize yourself as that, that's what you are in your library, in your school, in your university, in your corporate setting, you are leading because you're connecting people with information, and that is power. And what I like to tell people, whether it's through innovation or, some of these, like, yeah, like you said, very extreme levels of communication on one end or the other, whether it's political changes, I like to remind folks that while the world changes around us, our mission doesn't. That is the
Mm,
steady through line by which we can guide our steps. And what I mean by that is that it has always been a human process because we obviously do curation, but I think what folks sometimes often forget is that we also add community and context to that curation. Learning is a very vulnerable process and it's really done best in community. And so the work that we can be doing to champion our communities right now is to help them have these conversations, help them to feel less afraid about learning about the world and how
mm,
it's
mm,
changing around them, and then just engage in it ourselves and understand that we we've always been the champions of the digital divide, and the digital divide is just getting broader. And
mm.
so the work that we've been doing will just have to continue to be the work that we do. And I really appreciate folks like yourself and others that are knowledge experts in this space because what I'm seeing holistically is folks reaching out across disciplines and across fields to try to figure this all out together
Mm.
in a way that I wish I'd seen for other innovations.
Yeah, especially social media. When
Particularly,
social media came out, yeah, it
yes.
was like I think we are in a lot of silos. I mean, librarianship can often be a silo-based environment for a lot of, especially. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are, but I think the bulk of librarians don't have colleagues that they work with. They're all by themselves.
They
It's like
are.
most of my career was that way, and it was sometimes really difficult. So, this need that we have now to kind of connect with each other at different, across, within our levels, but then, like at different types of libraries is just so important.
But then recognizing the two, our power, because we are central to the power map that we operate in often, right?
Mm,
I notice like a
mm,
lot of small rural libraries are the information center during climate and weather disasters. I think about when there's tragedy or triumph, that's often centralized at the university library. I think about how often we are working alone, but it's because we are building relationships and crossing bridges across different sectors of our institutions. So you're absolutely right about that.
mm.
And so, sorry, that was such a good point that I think I was like, oh, okay, what was the tangent we were talking about? But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's also remind people that it wasn't our job to have the answers. It's our job to thought partner and lead you to research,
Ah,
you know?
yeah, that's such a great point.
And so I think sometimes like we're trying to take on the entire world, but we're actually missing our opportunity to have deep moral and ethical scrutiny on relevant topics and reminding folks that there has to be robust public engagement. I think
Mm,
sometimes what we're here to do is to platform the intellectual justice of the public. And you
mm,
and I both know that there's this private movement now, right, to privatize the work we do.
mm,
Half of the reason that we're having a cultural conversation, which is relevant with books on shelves, is simply because it's distracting us from the class one to dismantle access to opportunity through publicly funded institutions. Books are
mm,
not going to be any different than AGI and AI. This is a for profit product. And if
Hmm.
we don't have public good and the consumer rights and the patron rights of those at the table and a strong seating, we will be swept away again.
Hmm. Well, and that was one of the questions we started to hint at was about avoidance, like the concern that if we as a library community avoid AI, and will it lead to the elimination of our libraries and our positions? And I mean, that's hard to know, but what are your thoughts about that? Is it
So, yeah, I think
concern?
it's a great concern. I think about the idea that like escalators didn't replace stairs and ebooks didn't replace paperbacks. So I feel like obviously there's some good foundational base to be concerned, but I almost feel like we're flashing the light and the focus on a symptom of the concern as opposed to the overlying disease, which again kind of comes back to the fact that with the onset of the internet, there and the onset of just easy access to content, we started to conflate content with information. We started to conflate information with knowledge, and we started to really lower our value of
Mm,
access to information that's relevant and accurate. And so I
mm,
think that is the dragon to focus on and to slay, because the iterations of how you access information will continue to
mm.
evolve and to grow at
Right.
an incredible rate. But I don't think that we've really harnessed the messaging and held accountable the public who support us with policy and funding to recognize that these questions can only be answered if there is somebody that is a firewall between for profit innovation, which is good, and the policies that are written by them, by governance around them, and the folks that it will actually affect, our patrons, our societies, our library communities. So
Mm,
I feel like that's my place of focus. The means by which is important, and I'm really grateful for folks in the field who are figuring this out for us. But that baseline of recognizing libraries and their patrons and communities should have a seat at the policy table, the copyright table, the streaming and economic digital rights management table is something that I think we need to continue to focus in on.
mm, mm. Well, I jotted down what you said. You said robust. We need to have robust public engagement. I mean, so often, you know, I think most librarians go through phases of their career where, they maybe don't, I know I did, they don't engage with our community as much as they could. Especially if they're swamped and like there can be so much to do in a typical day-to-day job that you can easily blink and you're spending too much time in your office instead of, I mean, it doesn't have to be physically connecting always. You can connect digitally with the public too. But um, so let's use that as a segue.
Yeah,
Can you tie that in with the next question about optimism? So you touched on optimism just for a quick second earlier, but
yeah.
if there's a lot of people stressed out and nervous and worried about AI, including a lot of librarians, right? So with all the ethical problems and all the potential harm and safety concerns in the big picture with AI, and there's just so many issues that people are really like kind of bumming. And if if what I believe is going to happen with AGI coming and our society needing our help and everything, if we don't get started now as a community of librarians to embrace it, then it just might be harder when that time comes. So how do you help inspire people to be optimistic among all this yucky stuff?
Well, it's twofold, Mike. I think part of it is like I ran on the platform our stories are worth sharing because I think
Yeah,
when we remember our why, the how and the means by which we achieve that why become clearer and simpler. So I really appreciated you starting us off with a happy memory, right? Because I think it
yeah,
helps our library workers who are often burnt out and may even experience some significant vocational awe that they're doing good work, even when you have a C+ day, and you come in and you haven't had your cup of coffee yet, and Zoom doesn't want to work, and the bookmobile battery's dead. You're contributing to public good, and not every
yeah.
profession gets to do that. It's quite humbling, and just allowing yourself to take stock in that is important. But then, in my positions of leadership, I feel like I've kind of pivoted messaging a bit more to the public. Whenever I'm asked to like we if there's like a piece of library adverse legislation or we're seeing some policy that really kind of blocks the public sector from having a voice in meaningful technological policy, I'm often asked, so what would you say to this writer of the bill? What would you say to this governor? And I think that my role is actually to speak to the people who voted them into power, to represent their best intentions. And so I think as a profession, it really isn't us saving ourselves. We have to turn outward and remind the public and actually
Mm,
have fuller conversations with the general public about the importance of this work. So A, remember your stories and your why and be optimistic. B, I think that if you are in a place of leadership or you have folks that are in leadership in your sphere, encouraging to direct this out and to put this back into the hands of the people. The public is important because it empowers them and allows them to have representation in AI policy making. But then I think the third thing is that look at everything we've gone through. Like, look at our history.
mm,
I think about the Great Depression. I think about Jim Crow. I think about 9/11. I just think about all of these like significant, painful points of our history from one
mm,
perspective or another. And libraries are there imperfectly, but
mm,
they're there and they continue to try. We have to let practice not be the enemy of progress. Perfect cannot be achieved, but that's okay because we still keep growing. And so I would remind folks that during the pandemic closures, libraries showed up for their communities, all
mm,
types of libraries. During
mm,
the onset of digital rights management and movie streaming and ebook downloading, libraries showed up and tried to find ways to make this open and accessible to our general public. One of my favorite things to do is to have a fleet of truck drivers before they leave my state come in, download their ebooks, and then they take my library with them across the nation. And it's the only
mm,
thing they use us for. And I just
mm,
think about if we hadn't been active and engaged and positive about what could be during those pieces of innovation, we wouldn't have any footing at all. And I think what we can learn now is that by stepping up, even imperfectly trying to figure this out together, if we are superheroes and we continue to focus on the intellectual justice, privacy rights, and access of those we serve, then we are doing enough.
mm.
Bam.
Yeah. Well, I mean, man, it sounds, I know that the ALA theme right now, or probably all this next year, is show up, right? Show up for your library. So that's really kind of what you just spoke to. So can you just add one more specific, like really narrow down
Mm-hmm.
specific piece of advice for like picture a librarian that just watched some video on YouTube and learned something really depressing and sad about AI. And then like how can they show up to be optimistic? Like be specific if you
Okay,
could.
so how you can show up to be optimistic
Yeah,
would
like what's
be
something they could do or
they're going to lean into their own skill set and they're going to be their own patron. So if you're in like a
okay.
tiny rural community and you're like a librarian of one, go find your city tech guy or go find like the closest community college tech person and have a conversation about it because then
Ah,
you're addressing it in the community and you're getting to talk it out loud and they recognize you as a knowledge expert in the space so now you're more included in the conversations that will affect your sphere. Hop onto the core interest group that talks about AI or machine learning through the American Library Association and recognize that there are people all over the planet that are trying to solve this together. And whether you have robust resources or like you said you're just on fumes because you're like in your office and you're on the desk and then you're out in the community
mm,
or you're supporting a student, recognize that you're not alone.
mm,
We,
that's awesome.
with intellectual freedom, Mike, what we have been doing for a couple of years is describing the waters. And I think things like United for Book Bans built rafts. And what I think you're doing that's important and what the work is right now is to describe the waters, get into them, tread for a while, because then
Mm.
we'll understand what kind of rafts we need to build to support our communities.
Yeah, that's a great way. It's a great way to say it. I love it. Okay, and let's see. Last question, or
Yeah.
maybe the second last question. Um, what what do you see specifically in your library community right now that is going on with AI? Like, are you guys offering any kind of professional development for your librarians? Are you doing any kind of programming for your community to come in and learn? Like, what's going on in your world?
So I'm very lucky about that. Brandy McNeil, who's the Public Library Association president, actually zoomed in for my staff and service day this year,
Oh,
and talked to us about how to create AI policy. And so what I loved about that was like somebody from a larger system that represents public libraries at an international, definitely national scale, gave us time and attention and talents to kind of edifying and helping us learn more last winter. And
mm,
what that's enabled us to do is to realize that this is a continuing relevant conversation. And so whether you can bring in speakers or you can hold conversations or you can even do demonstrations where you bring up topics to like a group of teens about what they really care about, and then you show them the information through a basic, let's say, Google search, and then they sit there and they scrutinize that because the topic matters to them. We did BTS and when they were going to come back and regroup.
The
And
musical group?
yes, the musical group. And I'm like, I'm learning a lot today. But what I really learned is that as librarians, what we can do is kind of show them how the system is broken and what it would probably require to make it stronger. And what that does is it reminds them that they're part of the process of the future of information. This isn't something we all have to casually sit back and observe. We can contribute to this
Right.
future. And so by coming up with presentations, learning opportunities, even just demonstrations that focus on their cares, their currency, what matters to them, I think helps remind them and maybe just engages them in the process and invites them in a way that
Mm,
I'm not sure you can organically accomplish anywhere else in society. That's the power of
mm,
libraries, is that now teenagers are out there in the world saying, I have some ideas about AI policy. I have a focus on it that I might not have had before because somebody actually cared about my values and my interests and showed me some information in a different, unique way.
hmm. That's great. Okay, last question relates to the future of libraries and up and coming professionals that are interested in becoming librarians. So, what advice would you have? And before you share, so the question is about what advice do you have for anyone considering becoming a librarian or anyone that is just starting out their career? And before you share that, though, I loved this summer at the national conference in 2025 how there was a very nice donation to support up and coming people that are interested in becoming librarians. I mean, it was really touching. The gentleman that made the donation, I believe it was like $25 million. I saw him in the hallway and I just thanked him that like it really touched me because so many times in my career where I felt so alone and I actually left the profession and came back and I did that a
Oh,
couple of times. Yeah, and part of it was connected to this just feeling of like I'm all by myself and is this really what I'm meant to do? And the last time that happened was many years ago, but I'm now convinced more than ever that, my gosh, this is where I'm meant to be and this is where I'm calling. So that had a really big impact on me. So what are your thoughts or suggestions or advice for someone interested?
so yeah, Mr. James Lewis
Ah, that's his
donated,
name. Okay, yeah.
and he donated specifically for opportunities for people in our field, which to me shows a deep investment in the knowledge future of our country, but a deep investment in people who are willing to dedicate their lives to that service for
Mm,
others. And he actually, I don't know if I made him cry or if he made me cry because I like homeschooled and I wanted to go like work in a dusty basement as a paralegal. I was so shy I could barely answer a phone. And then I
you're
found
kidding.
I know nobody believes it. But less than 20 years ago, I actually didn't support my local library and I had a very quiet, closed off life. And I even actually went through graduate school digitally while I worked. And so my conduit to community, my conduit to these important and crucial relationships was ALA, and I was a part of the new members roundtable. And so
Mm,
the emerging leaders group, and I just got to go up and hold his hands and tell him like, thank you, because even goofballs like me get to have lives like this 20 years later because of people like you,
oh, mm.
and it just was beautiful. And it actually it connects to the answer I would give you. Bill, sorry, I'm crying now. He's just,
Oh, yeah, I know. You're getting me a little choked up too here.
it's just what a beautiful person.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but build your community, find people, send a
Mm,
handwritten letter of encouragement, find somebody who maybe in a completely different part of the field than you that has time to mentor, be a mentor, support people. You're a leader now. We don't have to wait for this degree or this many years in the building or this position. You are leading people now. People run into our libraries with joy and need, and they never say, quick, quick. Who's the 15-year X amount of position,
yeah.
postgraduate? They don't do it. They see us
Right.
all as the same. They trust us all as the same and need
Mm,
it. And so, in order to combat burnout, in order to remember your why, in order to develop a community, because in many ways it's a small profession. And so that helps you kind of look for opportunities not only for learning but employment. Look at the new members roundtable, look at emerging leaders, look at mentor interest groups, and just find your niche because it's such an interdisciplinary field and such an inclusive association that there is a place for you and there's a place for you to contribute. We need your voice and we need to
mm.
be able to support you as you do this work.
Well, I mean, that's really well said. I appreciate it so much. and you probably know too, like there's a lot of librarians across the country at all levels, and not all of them have ever even gone to a conference for librarians. I'm always amazed when they say, "Raise your hand if you this is your first time at the conference," and I look around, I'm like, "Holy cow! I can't believe how many new people there are here." So, I mean, just engaging in it is so powerful.
We
It's
learn from each
incredible.
other too. We all learn from each other. We never stop.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's great. We had over 2,500 new attendees at ALA conference in Philadelphia. We were also the largest like hotel block that city will see this year. And so we are small in some ways, but we're also mighty in others.
Mm. Okay, I promise this is the last one. I really promise. Tell us about ALA 2026 in
Oh,
Chicago.
it's
Holy
gonna be
cow. You're
fantastic,
going to be in
right?
front of like what, 20,000 librarians probably.
Be incredible. We're going to be celebrating. Obviously, it's right there in Chicago where ALA headquarters is. It's central to the United States. So I'm kind of hoping everybody will fly in and we'll just get to enjoy in the Windy City. We'll be kicking off our 150th birthday. I think that's your sesquicentennial. I have a year to figure out how to stop saying that wrong. And
I've
then
never even heard of that word.
yes, it means 150th. And what I love about this is that it will be a time for us to reconcile where ALA has gotten it wrong and really kind of work
Mm,
through our history, understand where we're trying to get it better, and then really just joyfully celebrate where we're going next. Because if there had been some sort of concern that libraries weren't relevant, I don't know about you, Mike, but I would say that at least the last 3 to 5 years have really put that notion to bed.
yeah.
Libraries are central community institutions, and they're our founders consider them the cornerstone of democracy, which is why 250 years later, they're still bedrock and part of this unique form of
Mm,
government. And
yep.
I'm just excited to celebrate that with people and to figure out where we go next.
Oh man, I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
Mm.
Hey, thank you so much for taking time to chat. And I'm so thankful for your service this upcoming year and look forward to partying with you this summer at the big celebration. So,
I'm looking forward to reading your book and learning more. So thank you for this chat. I'll see you in
oh,
Chicago.